into the second hour of the 9 to noon presentation. Welcome back to the Love Covenant. And here comes one of my very favorites, Charles Davis, NFL Network analyst, CBS game analyst on Sundays, and a Tennessee Titans analyst for a preseason football. And don't forget, NFL Network provides live coverage of the 2024 NFL Draft from Detroit starting tomorrow at 7 o'clock Central. Charles, love seeing you at the Combine. Seeing the same faces yearly for many years, that ain't a bad thing in this game.
No, it is. You expressed it perfectly. It is not a bad thing. In fact, it's encouraged and it's appreciated. Because when you start not seeing the same faces, it usually means something went wrong somewhere. And one day, it's going to be your face they don't see. So I'm thrilled to see the same faces every year.
Well, that's quite foreboding. Like certain facets of the NFL draft. And Charles, what are we thinking Kwesi and crew have up their sleeves for 11 and 23 and maybe more?
Yeah, I just think that they girded for the fight. They went and he did it in advance to get himself ready and get the organization ready to have the 2 picks in the first round that you'd start the packaging. If indeed the person you want is in a range that you can go get and make it all happen. Now, obviously, you don't really, as a general rule, gird for the fight unless it's a premier player, premier position, and quarterback certainly fits that bill. Duh. Right? So in this draft, it feels like 3 to 4 quarterbacks are the objects of everyone's affection. And I really think it's more 3 than it is 4. But that third one is kind of a split package. Some people see the third guy as yes, some see him as no. And it's split on which one's the third guy, meaning Drake May, North Carolina, J.J. McCarthy, Michigan. I think that if you're talking about Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels, I'm not going to call it Peyton Manning, Ryan Leaf. Whereas you remember, after all the dust settled, everybody, when you went and polled everyone again, everyone told you, I would have taken Manning at the top of the thing. Duh. But how many people neglect to say, but if I had the number 2 pick, I would have taken Leaf too at that time, which was true. Right? You remember it as well as I do. There wasn't anybody in the league who wasn't going to take one of them, 1 or 2. It was that simple. One worked out, one did not. It's kind of how this thing works. Here at the top, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, I think everybody would take them at 1 and 2 if they had the opportunity. Not the same vigor as Manning and Leaf, but you know what I'm saying. Yeah. 3 and 4, there's a little bit more of a division, but it'd be interesting to see how it goes because if Minnesota's in the fight for 3 and 4, they're not in the fight alone. Denver's going to want to get in the fight, and they will not hesitate to use future picks, I don't believe. The Raiders are going to want to get into this fight as well. And there's always a wild card team that you don't see coming. And I'm looking at the Los Angeles Rams right now.
Right.
Ton of picks, and they have a first-round pick for the first time since 2016.
Mm-hmm. If you have the chance, say, like with Drake May or J.J. McCarthy, all right, how important would it be for those 21-year-olds to watch and learn for a season?
I think it'd be very important, especially for Drake, 2-year starter, redshirt sophomore, kind of get things back under him a little bit. Because last year he had to do more than he should have had to do because things kind of broke down around him. Offensive line was shaky. Receivers weren't quite as deft. That sort of deal would be a nice thing. I don't think it hurts anyone, at that age to do it. Have we had those kids go in and play well right from the beginning? Well, we saw last year with Stroud. So sure, they can do those sorts of things, but most of the time having a little bit of extra time, a little bit of sitting back, watching, observing, being able to exhale when the season begins. I think that serves most people well. Certainly served Mahomes well, didn't it?
Yeah, no doubt about that. And speaking of a quarterback of a different variety, Penix Jr. What's it like, like for you as a DB or maybe a receiver catching passes from left-handed quarterbacks? Is it markedly different?
It is in the beginning, but if you do it over time, repetition and all, what I always think about? I think about those 49ers, those great 49ers teams that went from Montana to Young.
Yeah, right.
They figured it out, didn't they?
Yeah.
They figured it out. They figured Jerry Rice learned how to catch it spinning one way and the other. So did John Taylor. So did Brett Jones. And they won Super Bowl titles with both. So I just think it's a matter of just putting the time in and adapting. You know what it's like? It's like right-footed punters
Mm-hmm.
and the way the ball spins, and then it'll turn over one way. I remember being a punter in high school, and this isn't total apples to apples, but I was a left-footed punter. And no kid said, I mean, my little dinky league, no one saw a left-footed punter. I remember the first time I hit it and spun it, and the kid went and set up like it was a right-footed one, and that thing kicked back over his head, and I think, oh, this is different. And then I advanced myself to now, and remember all those years where Bill Belichick was determined to have a left-footed punter?
Oh, yeah.
And so there you go.
Charles Davis, NFL Network, also CBS game analyst and Tennessee Titans analyst for preseason games. NFL Network with excellent draft coverage beginning tomorrow, 7 o'clock Central, and the draft is in the Motor City. Just as an aside, do you ever listen to your CBS teammate Kevin Harlan call these basketball games? Holy cow, man! He gets better with age.
He's terrific, isn't he? Just terrific. And the first NCAA tournament I worked as a sideline reporter for CBS would have been 2001, 2002, somewhere in that neighborhood. My first play-by-play person was Kevin Harlan. That's where I first met Kevin. We were in Greensboro, North Carolina. I worked that first weekend. It's 4 games the first day, right? 2 games the second day, and then you go home. And I was done after the first round. I didn't advance on to the regionals. And somehow in my young career, I got bumped up to first class. I'm sitting next to Kevin, and he said, "Hey, how'd you get the seat?" And I said, "I don't know. I just got lucky. I'm like a silver medallion, and somehow I got up here." And he goes, "Well, as you advance in this career, son, there's one thing you're going to always want in your contract. Make sure you always get a big chair in your contract." I said, "Big chair?" He goes, "This, first class, big chair. Get one every time." So every time I text with Kevin now, I usually end it with, "Are you flying a big chair?" Yeah, right.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, Kevin's so kind, too, on top of...
Isn't he wonderful?
Oh,
isn't he just an incredible man?
Outstanding.
Absolutely. And you know something? Zero affectation, too.
Right.
That's just who he is.
Let me hit you with this. Down memory lane we go. Charles Davis, how would life have been different for you in the mid-'80s when you played 4 years for the Tennessee Volunteers? Mm-hmm. Had there been the transfer portal and a little NIL for some walking around money?
That would have been very interesting. And knowing my parents the way that I know them, it would have been interesting to see if my parents would have played the portal game with me. Yeah. Because as a kid, I think I would have wanted to play the portal game because there was money involved, right? So let's say someone thought I was good enough, they want to offer me somewhere else, right? And I was good, like, I want to go take the money. Would my parents have played the game or not? I have my doubts.
Right.
I really do, because just knowing them, my mom wasn't down with it. And we actually have a kid in the draft like that, so I'll keep the draft specific. Quinyon Mitchell out of Toledo. He had multiple offers, big money offers to go play Power 5. And his family, I think his grandmother's a big influence. They were like, hey, where were they when you got recruited?
Right.
And he stayed at Toledo. In fact, it went down to his uniform number. He wore 27 at Toledo, and he wanted to switch to a single digit when he became one of the top players. And his grandmother said, if you're good enough in 27, you don't need to be switching numbers.
Mm-mm. Oh, man.
And he stayed in 27. So he never took the money and went. I'm not pointing any fingers at anyone who takes the money. Right. Okay? That's opportunity. But there are some who see other things that are involved. And his grandmother's point was, if it's meant to be and you're good enough, the money will come later. And my mother, that sounds just like my mom. That sounds exactly like something she would say. Because I tried to go to the 8th grade graduation dance with a young lady who was in 8th grade, and I was in 7th. And my mother told me no. You know what she said? It's not your time yet. And it won't be fun if you go before your time. Yeah. So no, you can't go.
Wow.
How about that?
And off Mitchell's grandmother story, it harkens to the late great Bill Withers, God rest his soul, with a wonderful song called Grandma's Hands. And that's really all I could think about. And with the NIL and transfer portal, man, back in the day when you played for the Volunteers, shoot, your teammate Chris White might have taken those 9 picks in 1985 and transferred to like USC for some
great.
Yeah, some fat Hollywood NIL, and ain't no way Vi sick of Tehama is staying at BYU. But
no,
hey,
no, they make their moves. And by the way, Chris looked like Tom Selleck back in the day at Magnum PI.
Oh, geez.
He would have done really well out in L.A. with USC.
That's beautiful. All right, I know you're short on time. Let's fly through these to close. According to NFL.com, Charles Davis would pound his fist for South Carolina quarterback Spencer Rattler. Why?
Yeah, because I've seen the growth in the young man. I mean, we saw the Netflix thing when he was in high school, and that did him zero favors, right? But he was 17. I wonder if there are times we forget to give grace to how we are as kids versus how we are as we grow up and mature and learn. And I saw the process and the transformation, met the young man about 3 years ago where he walked up and introduced himself and has been very consistent with me since then. Because I was wondering, is this an act that he's trying to do the rehab thing? He stayed very consistent with me since.
Beautiful.
And I've watched his play do it. So I'm rooting really hard for Spencer Rattler. Expect him day 2. Whether it's the second or the third round, he'll come off the board then.
Kentucky running back Ray Davis, who I actually think could land here. Why do you love him?
You see the backstory. I mean, to go through what he's gone through with the siblings, with the group homes, no place to call his own, all those things, and still Temple, Vanderbilt, Kentucky. It's not just that he went to 3 places and produced on the field. He got degrees. And by the way, we're talking about some pretty good schools now.
Right.
We're not talking about just going anywhere. There's something extra in this young man besides being a really good football player. And
lastly, and locally, South Dakota State guard Mason McCormick. Pound the verbal fist for that one, please.
Pull up his picture. Pull up Wyatt Teller's picture, the All-Pro guard for the Cleveland Browns.
Oh, wow.
And tell me they don't look similar in uniform, the way they wear their pads, the kind of pseudo neck roll shoulder pads that they wear. And then plug in a tape of both of them destroying someone in front of them.
I greatly enjoy seeing you every year at the Combine. Thanks for the time on the draft. God bless you, my friend, and we'll talk soon.
Yeah, it's great to talk with you as well. Can't wait to see you again soon, hopefully this summer.
Yes, sir. See you, Charles.
All right, be good. Thank you.
Charles Davis, NFL Network, and CBS football analyst. He works with Iron Eagle, and he also does Tennessee Titans preseason games. Very, very kind man and very smart with not only the NFL, but the NFL draft. We have the cash thing coming up around the corner, a chance to put $1,000 in your hand, and then after that, we howl anew with Dane Moore at Dane Moore NBA via Twitter and the Dane Moore podcast, which is quite popular. Cash thing now, and Timberwolves chatter around the corner. You're listening to 9 to Noon, and here's the con.
The Fan, along with BigDeck.com, they want to give you a chance to put $1,000 in your hand with the National Cash Contest. Go to KFAN.com, enter the keyword green. Might win $1,000, might win some green with the keyword green at KFAN.com.
A 3 at the buzzer. It's offline. And for just the second time in franchise history, the Wolves have started a playoff series up 2-0. They did it against Denver in the 03-04 season. They've done it against the Suns here in the 23-24 season.
Minnesota Timberwolves blew out the Phoenix Suns again, and to chat about that and this series is Dane Moore at Dane Moore NBA. The Dane Moore NBA podcast is high-end, and you can learn more about that via his Twitter feed, once again, at Dane Moore NBA. Dane, thanks for the time, and help me with this. How in the heck did the Wolves get swept by these guys by an average of 15.5 points per game during the regular season? And good morning.
They're trying harder, PA.
Yeah.
I mean, that was part of it. Sinks in over the course of the season. You're the number 1 seed for, the majority of the season in the West. And then and what fuels them to be as good as they were this season? Defense. It's hard for them. I remember the beginning of the season, like first month of the year, it was like, wow, this defense is just nuts, right? Like they're pursuing everything. They're everywhere. And then you kind of get a month, 6 weeks into the season, and it's not there all the time, right? And I think that's the real question here for the playoffs is like, is it going to be this defense every night? Because if it's going to be this defense every night, like, you need to look out for the Wolves in the Western Conference. You get it during the regular season, right? Like 4 or 5 games in a week, probably not going to sustain, but that's the difference. They're playing harder, and they're executing more. They're just staying more consistent.
Dane, what are some things your trained eye notices with Finch and his staff? I mean, just doing wonderful work during the series.
Yeah, I think a couple things. I think defensively, they're kind of tapping into what they tapped into all year, which is just a growing sort of mutual trust between Rudy Gobert and Rudy Gobert's teammates. You know, forever in Utah, Rudy was hesitant to leave the paint, not because he couldn't get out and guard guys, but, you know, he didn't trust that somebody would have the rim for him if he got out there, that they'd be able to rebound when he was out there. And I mean, I don't think Cat had like a great game last night, but Rudy got out and switched all the time. And when Cat was out there, he went and was getting defensive rebounds. You know, obviously Rudy trusts a Jaden McDaniels more, a Nickeil Alexander-Walker more, a lot more than his teammates probably in Utah, just because they have more defensive ability. So I just think that like Finch has just tapped into that trust and is letting Rudy do more because he can do more.
Were you speaking of Karl Anthony Towns, Dane Moore? Were you surprised Karl stayed in the game with 2 fouls, only to pick up his third late in the first quarter and then have to sit the rest of the half?
I wasn't, because Finch does it all the time. He's like, I don't want to foul my players out, coach, and he's let Karl go with 2 fouls, you know, midway through the first quarter a bunch of times. And, you know, like, I get the idea behind that. It's just, it feels so frequent that Karl does pick up that third one.
Right.
When that happens, it's, you know, and he's got a difficult defensive matchup in this series. Kevin Durant, he's got he's a frequent offensive fouler there too. So like, in general, I like the idea of the trust. I would just say with Cat, and particularly, you know, in this series, it might be hard for him to avoid foul trouble in those situations. But yeah, it's been 2 foul trouble games for Cat in a row. Like that can't happen every night, right? Like Cat's has even played 50 minutes in the series yet. Like his minutes have been real low.
Despite a topsy-turvy, I guess that's one way to put it, first game for Mike Conley, he ignited the action at key times last night. What impresses you with the way he plays at age 36?
I think, like, obviously, I'm sure we'll talk about Jaden. Like, that's you look at the box score, that's like line item number 1 out of nowhere. Your, best defensive player comes and drops 25. But I think we can't sleep on what Mike Conley did and what Mike Conley and Rudy Gobert did, like in 2-man game in the first half to keep them in the game. Like, like you just said, Cat was in foul trouble. They were also like fronting Cat in the post. Cat didn't do anything offensively in the first half. And neither did Ant, because like we talked about last week, PA, right? Like they're loading up. Like objective number 1, 2, and 3 for Phoenix is like, don't let Ant score. So you didn't have Cat as like another lever to pull, and eventually it's Jaden. But I thought it was huge that Mike Conley and Rudy Gobert came in that 2-man game that we've seen throughout the season to be like, all right, Ant doesn't have it going, Cat doesn't have it going. Let's go to Mike and Rudy. Like that is a huge. We don't think this is a great offensive team, but they do kind of have a depth of options of things that they can go to offensively. They don't win that game without particularly Conley, making more shots out of that look.
Right, especially when things got slow. I mean, that's a brilliant take. Well, Jaden McDaniels, man, I mean, in a game including Edwards, Towns, Durant, Booker, and Beal, McDaniels led all scorers. So pay the plus 1,500 on that one. What was eye-opening to you with like the way he played?
Yeah, just like the fight and the confidence. Just like right away, it was the first possession of the game. He misses a shot, but he gets kind of caught in a sticky situation, but still confidently attacks and goes to the basket and takes the shot. And it was just like, with Jaden, like the confidence came and went offensively during the season, but particularly just in relation to his jump shot, his 3-point shot, right? Like was a little volatile there. I like that Jaden got his offense in ways that wasn't just shooting threes.
Right.
He attacked the offensive glass. He had 5 offensive rebounds in that game. That's, he's huge. He's 6'10", 6'11". Like that's a weapon right there. He kind of played a little bit of, two-man game with Ant when they were loading up on him, like showing up, slipping out of that. Ant was finding him. Like Jaden has an offensive game. I think we just get frustrated with it sometimes because what we're used to seeing is like 60% of his offense be just catch and shoot threes. Well, that's not the thing he's best at offensively. And in this game, you saw him kind of get to offense in ways outside of the three ball. I mean, he scores 25 but only makes 2 threes. 2 for 4, that's good, but that's 19 points elsewhere.
This is Dane Moore at Dane Moore NBA, the Dane Moore NBA podcast via his Twitter feed, and reactions to Game 2. Did you already record that podcast? Is it available now?
It is. Yep. Me and Kyle Teige went late last night after the game, and got some stuff for the players and Finch, and just trying to stay on top of this series, man. That's fun.
Very cool. People can find that right now at Dane Moore NBA. So the Wolves win despite their bench being outscored 28-17 and pay the plus 800 on Phoenix's bench outscoring the Timberwolves bench. What do you think? Why do you think Naz Reid never caught stride?
I don't know, man. It's like he's in this different role now where what was so great about Naz getting the chance to start or, play 30-plus minutes a night when Cat was out was just that it, like, allowed him to kind of catch a rhythm no matter what, right? Like, if he didn't get it in the first stint out there, it was like, okay, he's going to come back again. I still got 25 more minutes I'm going to play in this game, and it's tight, right? Like, it's tight. He kind of has to do something, like, rotation-wise, it's tight. He only played 16 and a half minutes in this game last night, and only 19 in the last game. There's not a lot of minutes available, and I'm a pretty big believer that not just Naz Reid, but kind of all offensive-oriented 6 men, like, you kind of got to it helps if you can get them more time out on the floor, right, to catch that rhythm. Yeah, Naz just hasn't really had that, but he hasn't really been given the time to catch it either. So it's, I'm not sure. You just hope that the next time it's like he comes out and hits that first 3, and then it's kind of going to be a avalanche from there, but haven't got that through the first 2.
Hey, Dane, help me with this. Just a couple more here, and thanks for the time. Mike Inori, the assistant coach, started the show today 90 minutes ago, and I posed this question to him, and you know what you're looking for, so I'm curious to see what you think. What are some ways the Phoenix Suns are in essence trying to deceive or fool Rudy Gobert, and in essence removing him from the action on the defensive side of the equation? I mean, he was farther away from the basket this game than he was game 1.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think what you see with Rudy, whenever he does get up in coverage like that, they call it like their high wall coverage. I used to run that all the time with Cat, like kind of up to show, block it off there, and then kind of drop back to the basket. What Phoenix is doing against that is they'll set a back screen on him. It's like that Spain action we think about with like that. Remember Pau Gasol, Ricky Rubio, like all those guys back in the day. That's like kind of where that came from. It's that Spain action. And when Booker is a screener on that back screen, well, he can kind of just peel right off of that for a 3. I think that's like, if I'm Phoenix, that's what I'm doing. Like way more of is multiple screen actions to cause confusion in the Wolves defense going forward. And the Wolves defense looks like it's up for it, but we're at the point when you're Phoenix and you're like, we got to hit something. We got to hit something hard that like breaks them, because it's getting to the point where it doesn't feel like they have like a ton more of adjustments that they can even make to go to in this series. But I think that's what you'll see a lot is more like of those back screens, dual screens, drag screens at the top, where it's like forcing the Wolves defenders, Rudy included, to go through multiple screens so as to stay connected to their man.
Amazing. And I'm with you. And what further complicates their situation, being the Phoenix Suns, is now Durant is averaging 6.5 rebounds per game this series, but he rarely heads into the grimy areas to get rebounds, and he used to go into the key a lot more. And I know he's closer to the end than the beginning, but with the Timberwolves' size, does that lead them to, with Durant staying a little farther away from the basket than usual, as you would say, with the size, the Wolves definitely have advantage basketball in that scenario?
Yeah, they just do, and it's like they're not getting they're not getting hurt on the offensive glass. They're not getting hurt at the rim, and while obviously like the free throw line and like the corner and threes are of value, that's really where some of the best offense in the league still comes from is offensive rebounds and putbacks, offensive rebounds and kickouts, or just getting to the rim. And those are things that Phoenix, like Nurkic aside, have not really been good at all season. That's not something they do. They're obviously a much more, because they have Kevin Durant and Devin Booker and Bradley Beal, a much more mid-range reliant team. And their whole strategy kind of relies in this series that they're going to make well more than half of their mid-range shots. And that's tough to do when you're being pursued by Jaden McDaniels and you have Rudy Gobert or Karl Anthony Towns coming up there to contest it. It's like, they're just playing from the less valuable spots on the floor, right? Like they have guys who can make them. Like you can't give them mid-range shots, but the Wolves are getting to the rim. The Wolves are generating more threes. Like they're just getting to the cleaner, better positions on the floor to score from, where Phoenix plays a tough game that relies on tough shot making, and Durant did it in game 1 and nobody did it in game 2.
All right, Dane, lastly, 1 minute and you get it all. What do you expect Friday night and with game 3? I mean, is Booker all of a sudden going to start getting around Jaden McDaniels? Is Beal all of a sudden going to start beating Edwards off the dribble? What do you expect?
Yeah, I mean, they're great players, so they could get hot, but like, it doesn't feel like it's going to be because of Wolves' breakdowns, right? Like, so it's just like an effort sort of choice, right? Like, it kind of feels like all 8-9 guys that play are playing like Nickeil Alexander-Walker plays every single game, just with that like desperation and that fight to stay glued to their guys. Like, I'm not sure Booker really gets going unless you take McDaniels off of him more to get Durant going. Like, I think that's what kind of like breaks it, is if KD gets going and you go, okay, we can't do this with Cat anymore. We got to shift Jaden onto him. And now Booker is going against not Jaden McDaniels. And then maybe he hits his flurry there. Granted, this probably one game Phoenix is going to have just like an awesome shooting game. They just have that in them.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't think it's just like we're sitting around waiting. Like Devin Booker's for sure going to have like 35 in the next game. He's struggling. Like this is an extremely difficult defense to generate good looks at. If he has a big game, it's probably going to be because he made tough shots.
That's excellent, my brother. I appreciate you, and we'll probably talk next week if you have time. Thank you.
Yeah, perfect, man. Thanks for having me.
Yep, for sure. Dane Moore at Dane Moore NBA via the tweet machine, and that's where you can learn more about his podcast. We head into the second half of 9 to noon on this sunny Wednesday in the cornfields, and we go back to back with football/NFL draft related guests, and that's next on KFAN. Dustin Baker at Dust Baker is writer and editor for VikingTerritory.com. He does Vikings-related YouTube work via VikesNow, and he and his crew were super kind to include me a couple of weeks ago, and I had a ton of fun. Dustin, welcome to 9 to noon on KFAN. How are you?
I am wonderful. I am so excited about this draft. And by the way, you're welcome to come back on Vikes Now at any time, my man.
All you got to do is call, and I'll fire up the Zoom or the StreamYard or the Teams machine, and here we go. Tell those who haven't seen it what you guys do at Vikings Territory.
Sure. Our producer is Tyler Ireland, and he and I kind of got together at the turn of the calendar this year and decided we wanted to grow the show. So we have all kinds of guests on, like yourself. We had Ben Lieber on. We have Thor Nystrom. He's a regular guest. And we just chat about everything related to the Vikings. There's never a dull moment on the NFL calendar, and we record pretty much every day. And usually the YouTube episodes, we stick to between 15, 30 minutes. With you, we got the privilege of going beyond that, and we're grateful for it. But yeah, check it out on YouTube. It's just constant Viking stuff at all times.
Why so impassioned by the purple?
Oh, wow. If you want to go back that far, I lived in Houston, Texas for a few years as a kid, and Warren Moon had just left the Oilers, and they were stinky, and it wasn't cool to cheer for the Oilers. Incidentally, we got word that we would be moving to Minneapolis. It took a long time for us to sell our house. And all of my friends said, hey, Warren Moon's the quarterback of the Vikings. You should like them instead. Not long after we moved to Minneapolis, they drafted Moss, and I have been right there with you. Pretty much about the time you got the job, PA, calling for the Vikings is when I solidified myself as a Vikings fan. And now they've had 25 quarterbacks in the last 25 years, from Jeff George to Nick Mullins down the stretch there. So I think it's time to draft one and make that guy one quarterback for, 10 or 12 years.
Well, they very well could have one tomorrow or 48 hours from now. We could be opining on exactly who that is. So, if you know, please share. Otherwise, what are you hoping for tomorrow night?
Well, believe it or not, it's a merger of both worlds. I've agonized over this prediction. I've never wavered on my endorsement. As soon as Cousins got hurt in Week 9 against the Packers, I knew the writing was on the wall that was probably it. And at that time, that week, right before Halloween, I thought, Drake May, if they can get up and get him, that's the guy that I want. And when they pulled off the trade with the Texans on March 15th, it became really attainable. So I believe that there is a deal in place with New England, but it's contingent upon whatever the Commanders do at number 2. So if you assume all of the odds makers are correct and the Commanders take Jaden Daniels, I personally believe that Drake May will be a Viking, but I'm only about 50.1%. The other thing that nags at me is the McCarthy angle and how similar his personality is to Kevin O'Connell. I think people gravitate towards themselves as like-minded folks, so I wouldn't be surprised at all if it's McCarthy. But anytime I get in my bag doing the pros and cons of the prediction, I always come back to that Josh McCown hire, and I don't think that was an accident. I don't think that's without merit. So ultimately my prediction is that they trade the farm, they trade the ranch for May, but I won't be shocked if it ends up being McCarthy.
Dustin Baker with VikingsTerritory.com. There also is a YouTube collaboration with some elite football minds, bringing in guests and stuff, and that's called VikesNow. In fact, the producer of 9 to Noon, Eric Nordquist, I think he'd be a terrific addition to the podcast. You guys would be great, and he'd love that little Spitfire out Southern California way.
Yeah, you talking about Dakota? Oh yeah, let's fire that up. I'm all in.
Yeah, I have a connection to Mad Producer also. If you need a little help with that, permit me to be the next to ask. Hit us with a bold prediction of any sort and anywhere in the draft.
Oh, I got a bunch of those, man. If I have to stick to one, I think the second pick, or let's say the first non-quarterback pick, will be a defensive tackle. I've debated whether or not they'll dance with the devil and draft Devondre Sweat after his shenanigans last week. It would be tremendous value at pick 108. Otherwise, Mason Smith from LSU makes sense. There's a defensive tackle from Duke as well. Carter, that's his last name. I think defensive tackle would probably be one of my bold takes. Another bold take is you're going to see probably multiple offensive linemen enter the Vikings orbit this draft. Right now, they have 9 on the roster. By the time we get to spring and summer, they're going to have about 16. That's what they had last year. So Kwesi didn't draft any of those last year. I believe they'll draft multiple offensive linemen. And then I don't know how bold this is, but I think Kwesi Adofo-Mensah will trade at least 3 times during the draft. We always called it Rick Spielman Trader Rick, but Kwesi trades even more than that. So I think bold-wise, give me a defensive tackle for the first non-quarterback pick for sure, and then a plethora of offensive linemen because the depth chart just almost requires it.
All right, my brother, in closing, who are some players you absolutely hope the Vikings house Thursday, Friday, and or Saturday?
All right, let's go with Drake May for sure. That's been my guy for way too long now. I would like to see Jamari Thrash as a WR3 candidate. They'll probably end up starting Brandon Powell or something like that out of the gate. Also like Javon Baker. I just don't know if he'll be there for the Vikings. I like Quantez Stigger's story at cornerback, and it's kind of debatable whether or not cornerback's a need. And then at running back, even though the need is diminished with Aaron Jones in the house, Braylon Allen from Wisconsin has the speed, the size, the youth. I don't see too many weaknesses there. So on a short list, those are the guys that come to mind. And I also want to say that I believe that the Justin Jefferson extension, no matter how much the media talks about, and the national media talks about trading him. I think that's hogwash. I think that a Justin Jefferson extension is already locked in, and they're just waiting to announce it during, the new quarterback week, anytime in the next week when they get May or McCarthy.
What leads you to believe that?
Just some birds chirping. People talk, and that's one of the ones that I believe in, that the Jefferson deal is either already done or is in place, and that it will just be, more of a formality, and then they can announce it in tandem with not like the night of the draft, but soon after we have the rookie quarterback in tow.
Hey, man, you guys do awesome work at VikingsTerritory.com. I really enjoy the podcast, VikesNow, and 9 to noon is here whenever you need anything, so stay in touch, okay?
Absolutely. I appreciate it, PA.
Yep. See you, buddy. That's a Dustin Baker at Dust Baker via Twitter, and he's a writer and editor for VikingsTerritory.com. So that's the local feel. From a national standpoint, we continue the NFL draft steamrolling with Dianna Russini. She is senior NFL writer for The Athletic, and we recorded with her earlier today. And I began with Dianna saying, great having you on the radio show. Congratulations on the outstanding job that you received with The Athletic. And thanks for joining. What's up?
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's funny. Before I joined The Athletic, after being with ESPN for almost 8 years, it was an easy transition from a sense of I was a fan of The Athletic. So if you like something as, when you're working somewhere else and you're watching another company do something at a really high level and then you get to join them, it really was a dream come true for me. It's hard though, Paul. I'm not going to tell you anything different because TV is easy. Writing is tough. So
right.
It's been a challenge, but I've really enjoyed it over the last few months.
Right. And it's without getting into like the inner workings at ESPN or anything like that, change can be tough. And, the Athletic is not necessarily upstart anymore. And, it's fantastic, but still, nevertheless, there had to be, there had to be a bold approach to making a move like that. That couldn't have been that easy, right?
Oh, yeah. I threw up a few times before I actually signed the paper. Just because it was such a different space for me after being in television my whole career, to take myself away from the camera and put all my information down on paper. And truly the gift in it all was when I started and I was nervous, I realized The Athletic hired me to do the job I was doing at ESPN, just in a different form. Words are words, no matter where they live. So I just went back to going, okay, what do you do? What am I doing? What am I good at? And let me just start doing that here. And I really just kind of put a lot of effort into that and The Athletic in terms of support and how they've helped me, and even just the beat reporters that cover all the different teams. They're truly the gifted ones. Alec Lewis, as you know, is the Minnesota Vikings beat reporter for The Athletic, who is one of the best reporters I've ever worked with, actually, in all my years. And he's maybe 13 years old. I learn from him every day. Yeah. I actually joke with him because I have a toddler and a 1-year-old, and Alec is still at that young age where they sleep late. So I'm up in the morning. I'm trying to get in touch with him to tell him stuff and talk, and he'll text me at like 11. He's like, "Hey, sorry, just woke up." I'm like, "You're on the same sleep schedules as my babies. Let's go, Alec. Come on." But he's young. Get to sleep, because one day he'll be up at 5 like me.
Oh, that's so beautiful you said that. Not even knowing the theme that we've created with Alec on this radio show, 9 to noon on KFAN. But he's wide-eyed. He sees sports in the world through the eyes of a child. And if perchance he's late to the radio show, which is rare, then the first thing I'll say is, let me guess, what were you doing? Out picking dandelions or maybe chasing butterflies, Alec? He has that appeal to him. It's very nice of you to say that. And with Dianna, as we mentioned earlier, at DM Russini, as senior NFL writer for The Athletic, and her Twitter feed is a compilation of high-end talkers. Holy cow. Let's start here. The Patriots are listening to and taking calls for that 3 spot. If the Vikings wanted to get there, would 3 first-round picks and maybe a little more do it?
I believe so. I know no decisions have been made and no formal offers at this hour. have been put on the desk of the New England Patriots, but scenarios have been discussed, and that's really how they've been doing business. And New England really wants to see that Washington is definitely going Jalen Daniels before they make any moves at that spot at 3 in terms of trade. And, of course, I think it would also behoove them to really wait to get on the clock before they start making any formal deals happen, because they've got some leverage there. Obviously, the adrenaline of the night, and on top of just seeing what the board looks like at that point. In fact, Arizona, Monty Ossenfort, who obviously comes from the New England way, is operating the same way. We saw him do it last year. I remember being in touch with people in Houston, and they didn't have any of their deals done until Thursday night, which, man, if you have the stomach for it, God bless you. But these guys have to operate that way. So New England has listened to or at least have had conversations with the Vegas Raiders. They've been in touch with the Denver Broncos, who are trying to get up as well. And the Commanders obviously are ahead or before the Patriots, and they're shut down for business. So yesterday they started telling teams who have been calling, teams like the Denver Broncos and the Minnesota Vikings, who would love to move up to get Jalen Daniels, that's not going to be happening. And we feel really good with where we're at, and we're all expecting Daniels to be that pick.
Now, at The Athletic, in Scoop City, once again, theathletic.com, you wrote, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is the general manager facing the most pressure. And while I agree that there certainly is pressure into what will be his third draft, why Kwesi and not, say, George Payton and the Broncos, especially given Sean Payton is an autocratic head coach?
Correct. And the dynamic in Denver, let's start there, is really interesting, because as much as George Payton there has that title of general manager, from what I gather and just being in on some conversations with teams that have done deals with Denver, George takes care of all the deals. He is the one talking to teams. But Sean Payton's voice, opinion, decision-making is almost the final call. It comes down to Sean Payton, and this is something the Denver Broncos signed off on from day one. When they brought him in for an interview, they knew what they were getting. And this is somebody who has a very, very clear idea and vision of what he wants his football team to be, what he wants his facility to look like, what he wants the practice field to smell like. That's the type of detail that Sean Payton brings into an organization, whether you like it or not. I covered him for years in New Orleans, and there are things that just blew my mind that he cared about that I didn't understand, but it's all part of his insanity. And I say that in a complimentary way, because we know that he's had some success. But I think for Denver, while the pressure is on for Sean Payton and George Payton to get the quarterback, they've got a little bit more wiggle room because Sean is new. And Sean is the one taking all that responsibility. So I think that keeps George in a safer spot. Whereas I think in Minnesota, I don't categorize Kwesi as being on the hot seat. I think that's a way too aggressive word. And I actually did notice that in our Scoop City newsletter. Someone got a little funky and then made it a little too aggressive compared to what I had put in there. I really thought it was important to share with the readers that let's take a look at the 5 GMs who got to get this right. The Joes in New York, right? Joe Shane and Joe Douglas with the Jets and the Giants. I'd put them up there. I would put Sean Payton in terms of the pressure. I'd even put the Kraft family. After everything we've seen over the last few weeks, a lot of talking, a lot of chatting, and they're telling people and publicly, internally, we're getting a quarterback. So they better figure out a way to get the quarterback that they want. And then you get to the Minnesota Vikings, where they made the decision as an organization, Kwesi to Kevin O'Connell to ownership, that they were not going to pay Kirk Cousins the type of money he was looking for and the type of money that they assumed the Atlanta Falcons were willing to pay him, and what we saw pan out. So they had to make that call. And I believe that was very difficult to move on from Kirk, knowing that O'Connell and Cousins obviously had that great relationship and what they were able to do and the belief in what he was and what they've developed together. So now the pressure's on because they have to have the answers. They have to be the ones to get the quarterback that's going to work. and work quickly because there are no other answers. Sam Darnold, yes, is there on a 1-year, $10 million deal. But we've seen Sam's work. It's fine. It's fine. He's not the future, though. I don't believe him to be, unless Kevin's able to really get the best out of him and really surprise all of us, which I wouldn't put it past Coach. But I think at the end of the day, the pressure is on the Vikings because they need to get this right. They need to find the quarterback in order for Casey and Kevin O'Connell to have success and to get extended.
All right, back to this treasure trove of the X machine known as @DM Russini, and you touched on it earlier, but unpack it a little bit for us. So, if the Cards trade, it will for sure be when they are on the clock, right? And why is that?
Yeah, so Monty Ossenford, that's how he believes he can get the best deals done. Put the pressure on the teams. He sits back. And he's in control here. He's really sitting in a nice position here. With he can either stick and pick and probably go for a Marvin Harrison type player or a top receiver if he perhaps thinks that maybe Marvin isn't it. Or he knows teams like the Denver Broncos, the Minnesota Vikings, the Raiders have all been interested in the quarterback market. So for him, he knows that he can kind of put their foot on their throats, so to speak, tomorrow night. So no deal has been done yet. There's been talks, lots of chatter, but Monty really doesn't get in the weeds yet. He tells everyone he's open for business, and there's a little bit of, we'll call it wink, wink, a little flirting, but nothing formal just yet. So Arizona essentially can be the team that winds up holding the keys to all of this if the New England Patriots decide to stick and pick with quarterback. Right.
And Dianna Russini, senior NFL writer for The Athletic, just a few more here. So if you want Drake May, do you believe it has to be pick number 3?
I'll start with what other teams are telling me because everyone is mocking right now the way the analysts and reporters and the media is doing as well. So I try not to read what other media is doing. I try to just ask the teams how they're mocking it. So they have more information than we do, and they know more, and they have the relationships, and they're talking to the agents and the players, because that's where a lot of this information comes from, by the way, for those wondering, how do these teams know that this one is going here or having conversations? Because a lot of teams have told the players that they want to pick, we're coming after you. We're trying to move up to get you, or, hey, you're our pick at the top here. So while we don't know formally, because teams aren't going to announce it, like Chicago, obviously, we know Caleb Williams is most likely ending up there. That was decided pretty much before the combine. They want to keep with the entertainment and the excitement of the NFL and wait for draft night. But a lot of players have been told things that, hey, if it falls this way, we're coming for you. So that puts you at Drake May here, where a lot of people around the league believe that is the player.
Yeah.
That the New England Patriots were a bit split. There were some there that wanted Daniels. There were some that wanted J.J. McCarthy. There were some that wanted Drake May. But in the end, that's what they're leaning towards. And obviously, trading out is still on the table for New England. They are not closed for business.
Okay, now last one. So end of the equation. Do you believe in your heart the Minnesota Vikings roll up to 3 and take Drake May?
Do not let me speak from my heart. This is what gets me in trouble. And I have had anxiety about Minnesota for a week now. And my anxiety comes from a place of I want to see them land a quarterback they want because I want to see them have success. And I just don't know if it's going to fall that way. I don't know if they're going to be able to wiggle New England out of that, knowing that the owner wants to get a top quarterback. Now, if New England feels like they can get back in and get back up to get J.J. McCarthy, if Drake May were to fall to, or to get picked by Minnesota if they're able to get up, that's one thing. But if there's any team right now that I have some nervousness about, it is Minnesota. But I do know they are going to be doing everything they can to try in what they can control to come out of this thing with the top QB.
That's beautiful. So when can we watch you on the Athletics Draft Show?
All right. So if you go to YouTube and just in the search engine and make it easy for you, just put in The Athletic NFL. Really easy. It'll pop right up. So if you have ESPN on the NFL Network on, which they do the best in terms of all the entertainment in the show, if you just want to hear people talking about it and hearing things that we're hearing before the start of the draft even, start us there. 7 o'clock we'll be on the air, and then we'll go all the way through the draft. And we have our analysts on there. We've got Robert Mays hosting, who's fantastic. Dane Brugler, he just put out a thing called The Beast. If you haven't checked it out, it's essentially his Mel Kiper book. It's his Bible of this draft. So if you're a nerd and you just want to know more, Dane is plugged in and knows a lot about these players. Thursday, Friday, and even on Saturday. So make sure you check that out, and I'd appreciate it.
Dianna, that was great. I look forward to seeing you at Twin Cities Orthopedics Performance Center, hopefully in the near future, and best of luck with the draft, okay? We greatly appreciate it.
Look, I'm just excited. I get to tell my husband when he gets home, I got to go on the air today with a legend. So you've made my day. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're sweet. Thank you very much, Dianna. Have a good day.
Thanks, guys.
That's The Athletic's Dianna Russini with some insiding and some takes and talkers on the Vikings draft with PA. Thank you to Dianna for joining. It's been Wolves into Vikings, into Wolves, into Vikings, into Wolves, into Vikings all show long. Thanks for the talkbacks and texts along the way. We're jumping into the Wolves again next segment. Bally Sports analyst Kevin Lynch is in studio with PA. Final hour, 9 to noon.